Look at the United States today, and you see a contradiction. On paper, it is the unquestioned economic and military heavyweight of the globe. Yet internally, it operates across a deep fault line of polarization and distrust. To understand why, we must look back to when these cracks appeared. The 1970s ended with a pervasive mood of national decline. Economic stagnation and a sense of losing ground globally left the country searching for a way out. Ronald Reagan seized that moment. He campaigned on a promise to make America great again, offering a unifying narrative of national renewal. He gave citizens a clear moral enemy in the evil empire of the Soviet Union, positioning the United States as a singular force for good. At home, Reagan's agenda focused on pulling back the state to give markets a freer hand. He popularized the idea that government was the problem, while introducing trickle-down economics, the theory that cutting taxes for the wealthy would eventually benefit everyone through investment and job creation. These policies coincided with an economic rebound and the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. But the same strategies that signaled mourning in America were simultaneously creating the divisions that define the country today. During the 1980s, finance began to displace industry as the engine of the American economy. Deregulation and the rise of junk bonds transformed corporate culture, enshrining an ethos that prioritized immediate, massive wealth generation on the trading floor. But as Wall Street boomed, the American heartland hollowed out. Manufacturers moved operations to countries with cheaper labor, leaving behind derelict industrial spaces and vanishing middle-class livelihoods. Globalization generated enormous wealth, but it left millions of Americans feeling abandoned. While the economy shifted, the administration dramatically escalated the war on drugs. Dealing with a surge in crack cocaine, the government, with bipartisan support, chose to treat addiction as a crime, expanding policing and backing mandatory minimum sentences. Data shows drug use rates were similar, yet penalties for crack cocaine, common in poor communities, were far harsher than powder cocaine in affluent circles. This fueled an explosion in the prison population, pushing America's incarceration rate past any other democracy. These policies drove a physical and financial wedge through the country, separating a wealthy financial elite from marginalized communities being increasingly penalized and incarcerated. In the early 80s, a mysterious and deadly epidemic began spreading among young gay men. As the AIDS crisis intensified, the Reagan administration remained publicly silent for years, failing to acknowledge the disease until thousands had already died. Religious conservatives framed the epidemic as a consequence of immoral behavior, resisting pragmatic public health measures and turning a medical emergency into a theological debate. The government's inaction sparked a massive backlash from activists. They saw the official silence as a death sentence, and the resulting conflict destroyed the public's trust that the government would protect all its citizens equally. This established the culture wars as a permanent fixture of American life. Private issues of identity, sexuality, and religion were pulled into the hostile center of American politics, creating a second major wedge that made compromise nearly impossible. By the 90s, Bill Clinton attempted to bridge these divides with third-way politics. He was a centrist who balanced the budget and embraced free trade, hoping to find a pragmatic middle ground between the left and right. However, House Speaker Newt Gingrich pursued a different strategy. He replaced legislative compromise with outrage-driven warfare, weaponizing government shutdowns and mastering the polarized rhetoric of the new cable news age to attack the presidency. This strategy reached its peak with the impeachment of Bill Clinton. The political system became consumed by presidential scandal and media circuses, pushing the partisan divide to a breaking point and prioritizing the destruction of the opposition over actual governing. That partisan gridlock infected the 2000 election, which came down to a razor-thin margin in Florida. The recount was eventually halted by a fiercely divided 5-4 Supreme Court decision, signaling that the nation's highest court had become as polarized as the halls of Congress. Even scientific consensus fell victim to this divide. As evidence for climate change mounted, the issue became a partisan loyalty test. Republicans increasingly sided with powerful fossil fuel interests, eventually framing a global scientific reality as an elaborate political hoax. By the turn of the millennium, the third wedge was locked in. Political institutions were no longer tools for solving national problems. They were weapons used by each side to try and delegitimize the other. The administration argued that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction and posed an imminent threat, shifting from a defensive stance to a doctrine of preemptive war based on unproven evidence. The invasion was a catastrophe. No WMDs were found, and the resulting insurgency cost hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives and trillions of American dollars. The images of prisoner abuse at Abu Ghraib further eroded the country's moral standing and its own citizens' belief in the mission. The cumulative weight of these decades, the economic divides, the cultural combat, and war built on false evidence, gutted the public's trust in its own institutions. The mourning in America of the 1980s ended in the deeply polarized, cynical nation we live in today.